That's looking at our model. So we got n bidders. So each bidder has intrinsic value, VI, indicate willing to pay, and they only know by themselves is private information. So the bidder, one of the bidder would win and play price PR, and his utility is going to be VI minus PR. So the P, the value they're going to pay would depend on what kind of auction, right? It could be first price auction would be second price auction. The first price auction could be the one that their actual value. The second price auction would be the second highest value. And we also define that if they lose, and their utility would be zero, right? And so in other words, that bidders prefer losing than pay more than their value. So that's the underlying sort of model, also sort of simplest sort of assumption here. So if you look at this, is that you got an intrinsic value high to everybody. So think about this as sort of types, right? And then you got the bits is the action, and simultaneously taking action bits, and then everybody get these their payoff, right? If you don't win, your payoff is zero. You lose payoff. If you win, then your sort of payoff is the intrinsic value minus the how much money you have to pay. So if you pay higher than your intrinsic value, then you got negative payoff, right? You would rather not winning. So how to bid given your intrinsic value? This is quite similar to like a Bayesian game, or is essentially a special case of Bayesian game, that you come in with some sort of function which are mapping the types to your bits, right, to your action. So in other words, in this case, is a function that map your intrinsic value to your bits. Okay, so it could be rule, it could be function, could be any kind of presentation. So we can normalize as a Bayesian normal form game, where each of these actions are the what kind of types. Sorry, each of the action could be some kind of function. Obviously, you have a unlimited kind of function value, right? Mapping. Let's say mapping. Therefore, you could have unlimited dimension in this normal form game. So, but this is an example of this game with incomplete formation. So then they will have this dominant strategy, equilibrium, and Nash equilibrium, all this concept of the holds, right? Each strategy is optimal, whatever other strategy is a dominant strategy, equilibrium, right? I think we have learned in the first of level lecture, and each strategy is the best response to each other, and then they reach the Nash equilibrium. So here, the slightly different is that, or slightly confusing bit here is a strategy here is a function, okay, rather than a mixed, more than a probability, right? In the mixed strategy case, and because you have a mapping from the intrinsic value, okay, to your actual action observed. So, and then we can look at some sort of a math behind it. So in the second price auction, choose telling. So in other words, you will come up with a function which say whatever value it is you got, intrinsic value, you're gonna tell in the choose, therefore using that value as your action, right? Assigning to the auction. So here, so sorry, I was wrong saying that it was Nash equilibrium, but actually it's a even strong concept here. Equilibrium, even strong stable points here is in fact its dominant strategy. Is that no matter what other people do. So in English auction too, right, with a private, so that no matter what others do, I will never gain anything lying. Bits is easy, dependent from belief on the value. So this bidding is quite easy, right? Because you only given your own intrinsic value, and you basically do the bidding, right? It doesn't really matter what other people do. So it's a dominant strategy. and also depend on our belief on the value of others, right? It's a dominant strategy. So, and also if it's truth telling, then indeed it's efficient. Yeah, because selling bidder with highest bid is actually selling to the bidder with highest value, because they are truthful. They're telling the truth, isn't it? So it is efficient. Let's prove now that truthfulness is a dominant strategy. We will show that bidder one will never benefit from bid that is not V1. So just like looking at this. Suppose, okay, you as a bidder one win, but bidding V1. Okay, so that's your sort of a bidding when you bid V1. B1 is the highest bid, and B2 is the second highest bid. So in this case, right, B1 is the highest bid, B2 is high. And then your utility would be V1 minus B2 larger than 0, right? Because this is in our case, that's the second price auction is the second highest. You bid that you are the highest bids, and you're telling the truth, right? Because let's say you bid with your intrinsic value, and the second price is actually B2 smaller than that. So your utility is V1 minus B2. So in this case, if you bid anything above B2, right? If you suppose you deviate from you being in the true value, you bid something here. If you bid something here, right, they will not change anything, isn't it? Because think about this, your utility is your intrinsic value minus the price you're going to play, which is second price. In this case, B2. So any bit below V1, above V2 wouldn't change your utility whatsoever. It wouldn't change the fact that you win the auction as well. Therefore, there's no gain from lying it. Okay, so but if you bid less than B2, what's going to happen? Suppose your intrinsic value is V1, but you bid something lower than that. Okay, if you're lower than that, obviously you're going to lose it, right? You're going to lose it. Then your payoff is 0. Okay, but we know this that if you're telling the truth, your value is actually higher than 0. So therefore, there's low gain from lying. So in this case, your intrinsic value is actually happens to be higher than the second price auction. In this case, there's no point of change your strategy, right? Change the fact that you're telling the truth, right? You don't wanna lie anything. But let's looking at the case that what happens that your intrinsic value is here, because this intrinsic value is something that you can consider as a random variable, right? And the B2 is also a random variable. In the case that the second price auction is higher than your intrinsic value, to see what happens. Do you want to deviate from it? So B2 is the highest bid now. Okay, so B1 utility is 0, because if you in this case telling the truth, right, you're gonna lose, and therefore your utility is 0. But suppose you want to deviate from it, right? Anything you're gonna deviate from here until up to the B2, it won't change anything, because in that case you're not gonna win. Therefore, your utility gonna become 0, become same as before. There's no gain from lying. But and what happens if you sort of your intrinsic value is V1 here, but actually you bid higher, okay, than B2. Now suppose you are winning, right? In this case, you're larger than B2, and B2 is the second largest, and you're winning that. Then this B2 is the price you're gonna pay, right? But V1 is your intrinsic value. Looking at it, this is actually smaller than 0. Okay, so you actually, if you're bidding higher than B2, you have a negative utility, negative payoff. it will be worse than your utility is 0 in the case that you're telling the truth. So in this case, you don't want to deviate either. So that actually completes the proof that second price auction is truth telling. It is also efficient, as I said before. So in equilibrium, which is in this case is a dominant strategy. The auction allocates the item to the bidder with the highest value. So without assuming anything on the value, right? Because the moment we actually haven't have any assumption whatsoever about the distribution of this intrinsic value at all, right? It's really independent of that. So second price auction, English auction, equivalent, have a choose for dominant strategy, equilibrium, efficiently and equilibrium. First price Dutch auction are equivalent, choose for whether they are truthful telling, whether they are efficient. So truthful, okay. Let's look at whether it's truthful. Is anyone can answer whether this first price auction is truthful or not? Its first price auction is that you could potentially win by lying, isn't it? As long let's say your intrinsic value is $100, but you don't really need to specify $1 in order to win. You just say 31. You actually win, but actually have a much larger game out of this. So not truthful. So it's not dominant strategy in first price auction.
Jun, can I make a question? So the idea of the first price, isn't it that everybody places their bets simultaneously, so you don't really know what the other person is going to do?
No, you don't.
So I can't really use the strategy of just one-upping over the opponent.
Sorry, can you say it again?
So I can't really do the where you assume that the other person is going to play 30, so you can just say I'm playing 31.
Well, yes. So I think just because you have this first price auction, so I think mathematically this will be much clearer in that then you could potentially say lower. So suppose you have a truthful $100, and then you could actually, you don't really know the others auction, right? Sorry, you don't really know others the bid would be, but you could somehow have certain estimation. Okay, then in this case that you could have a roughly sort of estimation. Suppose you have some distribution about the intrinsic value, and then if the other people face the same thing as yours, then they could have some sort of bid about their value. Okay, then you have some roughly estimate about their distribution of their the bids. Based on that, you could actually say, okay, in this case, yes, if I want to mean, maybe I can reduce my bid a bit, because as long as I can win, or in the situation when I win, right? And what will be the value, maximum value I'm happy to pay? So
would you also need to consider how much cost there is in losing? Like,
yes, you would think about. I think this intuitively, it is say you could potentially hiding your $100 to win that auction in the first price auction. But let's looking at this math later on. That will be much clearer. Yeah, maybe stay tuned. I think we can do analysis. And so there's no dominant strategy, and so the belief and model as a probability. We can looking at that to try to understand. So a set of bidding strategies in large equilibrium. If each bidder strategy maximize his payoff given the optimal strategy of others, and in auction, bidder do not know their opponent value, and there's incomplete information. So each bidder strategy must maximize. So this sort of setup. So let's looking at these. Just looking at a bit of math before we actually go to these the simple model for first price auction. So let's say phi is a random variable. Then we can write it down. This cumulative distribution is basically from that range that you can take the value from 0 to t to the probability, 0 to 1. So that cumulative distribution function is really the probability that the random variable is smaller than some value that you're given. So fs. So the density is basically take a derivative of that is density distribution. Expected value is take a integration of take expected value, take integration. Sorry, of that marginalize this density distribution. And so let's say uniform. It's very simple. The uniform case that this cumulative density function is just x itself. And the density is 1, and then expected value is basically 0.5. So let's looking at a simple Bayesian auction model. We got two buyers, value between 0 and 1, right? Intrinsic value is uniformly distributed between 0 and 1. What is the equilibrium in this game of incomplete information? So the question we want to ask is, suppose we have this Bayesian auction model. The first price auction efficiency. Let's looking at the first price auction. So let's looking at this. So in this case, it's just looking at a very simple case, is that bidding half of my intrinsic value. Okay, if everybody in this case bidding half of my intrinsic value, whether it's equilibrium. So you got this two bidders, uniform distribution. Okay. So so yeah, maybe I can tell you, just try to answer the question just now. I think one way to look at it is that to think about this, because in this second price auction, right, when you deviate from your truth telling, in either case, you don't want to, you cannot improve your utility at all. But if you think about the the first price auction, if you bid just in that particular example, if you bid $100, then that's your intrinsic value at $100, and you pay $100. So then your utility is basically 0. But you could lower that bid, right? You could lower that bid. Then you would have a positive utility. Therefore, you would deviate from that intrinsic value that you had, because you could better off. Okay, I mean, it's just this is just an example. Intuitively, it is the case, right? Intuitively, you could understand that they would deviate. As for how much they want to deviate from it, that obviously that need to have some mathematical derivation, the theory behind it. So let's just looking at the theory here. So we first looking at is that in this very simple setting, we got two players, and the intrinsic value is uniform distributed in 0 and 1, and see what's gonna happen. So we first just to really show that in this case, people tend to bid lower. Right. In this case, let's say bid half of it, half the intrinsic value, in fact, is one of equilibrium. So let's assume, let's prove this. Assume bidder strategy is a bid half of the intrinsic value. And we need to show that if the bidder 2 strategy is that whether the player 1, his best response is also play half bid. So clearly, there's no point to bid above 1 because the intrinsic value is between 0 and 1, isn't it? So bidder 1's we need to calculate the bidder 1's expected utility, and we will say in that expected utility, okay, we will say bidding half is the best option they got. They don't want to deviate from that. So that's basically the underlying mechanism to do that. So what is beta 1's expected utility? It is the fact that you only have a positive utility, the others will be zero, is that you would bid higher than the second one. Therefore, when you're winning that auction, and when you win, your intrinsic value is V1, right? But the actual pay is your own bidding value. So the V1 minus B1. That's the sort of utility you get. It could be negative, isn't it? So when you bid higher and you have to pay higher, then maybe this B1 will be higher than V1, therefore you could get a negative utility. So that's just looking at the probability. How can we calculate that? So in what situation B1 would be larger than B2? Remember, we have this uniform distribution, right? And we know this B1, sorry, this B2 have this bidding strategy. So we can basically replace this B2 as B2 divided by 2. That's their bidding, right? That's a bidding. They're gonna bid half, and this is nothing because in the uniform distribution, this is nothing but 2B1. So this probability is 2B1. To understand why it's 2B1, in fact, you can remove this 2 here, V1, right? And taking into fact that this is uniform distribution, and this is basically cumulative density function. And this cumulative density function 2B is basically is in uniform distribution. It's just 2B. So this is basically write it down here. But if you don't, difficult to understand this, you could actually looking at this, so to see what happens. So basically, is that this probability is cumulative density function with 2B here. So this is only a quadratic value, quadratic function respect to B1. Okay, then we need to really see B1 is equal to B1, this function is equal to B1 divided by 2, right? This is sort of their maximum value. How do you verify this maximum value? Obviously, you can take a first order condition of that, take a derivative of that, make it 0 to verify whether that will give you, B1 value. So you can actually say indeed the B1 equal to B1 minus 2, only bid half your intrinsic value. It is indeed the best response to B2. Therefore, it is Nash equilibrium. So bid half of that intrinsic value is the best response to each other. Therefore, is the equilibrium. So this gives you an example showing that indeed this first price auction is not true spontaneous, and actually people tend to bid lower than their intrinsic value. In fact, you can generalize this to. Sorry, I think I stopped already. So I'm going to stop here. So just this slide, I'm going to stop. So this, in fact, we're just looking at a specific case, but in general, it's that if you have n number of bidders, and this is sort of your deviation from the true bidding would look like. So that means when you only have 2 bidders, then you actually write it down. This 1 minus 2, 2 minus 1 divided by 2 is actually a half, right? That's why, in this 2 bidder case, you only bid half. As the number increases, you can see that you tend to closer to your true value, right? When the n become much, much larger, actually you tend to bid your true value. So if you're looking at this is a monotonic function, right? So it's a monotonic function. Therefore, you always give, in this first price auction, you always give the you always give the item to the one who has the highest intrinsic value, right? So therefore, it's also efficient.